of the same fact. Well, let me go on to a couple of the others. Michael Moore, that's chapter 2. Michael Moore looks to Noam Chomsky as an inspiration. And Michael Moore has been equally strong in his attacks. His big theme has been corporate America. Bashing corporate America for all sorts of social wrongs, alleged failures that they've engaged in, and certainly that's an important part of the debate. But Michael Moore goes further. Michael Moore has said repeatedly, at least half a dozen times that I've found in his books, on C-SPAN, in newspapers, that he does not invest at all in the stock market. He considers it morally unclean. The Pentagon is dirty money, and it's greedy money. And he's been very absolutist about this position. Well, like his intellectual godfather, Noam Chomsky, Michael Moore has been completely hypocritical on this account. He and his wife set up a tax shelter, and in that tax shelter, they own hundreds of thousands of dollars of stock. And it's very interesting, if you look on the back cover of the book, you'll see that we reprint only part of that portfolio. He still owns many of these stocks today. And look at this kind of stock that Michael Moore owns. He owns shares in pharmaceutical companies, which he claims to condemn, companies like Eli Lilly and Tenet Healthcare, which owns HMOs. He owns sort of the leading bastions of the military-industrial complex, Boeing and Honeywell. In fact, he, a few years ago, even owned shares in Halliburton, of all companies, which for him is the Darth Vader of corporate America. This is a classic example of Michael Moore saying one thing and doing the opposite. And I think what's particularly important about this is not simply an exercise in sort of gotcha journalism. What I think is so amazing about this is that Michael Moore is going on college campuses and he's selling this anti-corporation ethos. He's telling young people, you don't want to work for the boss man at a corporation. You don't want to invest in the stock market. That's sort of a dirty or filthy way to make a living. So he's advising young people on a course of action that he himself is not even coming close to living by. Another contradiction of Michael Moore, and I'll throw Al Franken into this as well. There's a chapter on Al Franken, and that comes to the issue of affirmative action. I mean, goodness, if you read the language that Michael Moore and Al Franken have used in the affirmative action debate, it's truly astounding. Both of them have said that if you oppose affirmative action, that's de facto evidence of racism. And both of them make jokes that if you go to a meeting in corporate America, or if you go to a meeting of Republicans, you're going to see all white faces, and that, again, is de facto evidence of racism. Well, I decided to look and see whether Michael Moore or Al Franken actually practice affirmative action. I went through and used a database that's widely available on the internet called IMDb. I looked at all the credited people that were given positions on Michael Moore's films, on his television shows. I looked at the people that did research on his books. And lo and behold, what I found was pretty amazing. I found that Michael Moore has hired, by my estimates, 134 people to senior positions since 1990. Of those 134 people, a grand total of 3 were black. Al Franken's record is even worse than that. Now, Al Franken, in his book Lies and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them, goes after a number of people claiming bigotry. He goes after Bob Jones University, for example, in the Carolinas, a Christian fundamentalist college, and says that they're bigots and racists because the student enrollment there is only 1% black. Well, the interesting thing is that Al Franken, since 1990, has hired 112 people to work on his radio show, his books, his television projects, and his movies. And out of those 112 people, Al Franken has hired a grand total of 1 black person to serve in a position. What that means, of course, is that Al Franken's staff is whiter than Bob Jones University. And it'd be interesting to know how he would want to explain that contradiction. With Michael Moore on the issue of race, he's also been very outspoken on the issue of where people choose to live. And in his book, Stupid White Men, he talks about the fact that bigotry is prevalent in America because whites live in white neighborhoods and blacks live in black neighborhoods. And he says this is a conscious choice, racist choice that white people make. Well, I decided to look at where Michael Moore lives. Michael Moore lives in Central Lake, Michigan, which is northern Michigan. That's where he's registered to vote and where he spends most of his time. Central Lake, Michigan, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, has 2,551 people living in it. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, there's not a single black that lives in the entire town. So here again you have Michael Moore pointing the finger at ordinary Americans, claiming that they're bigots because of the housing decisions that they make, and yet he's doing it more so with even greater gusto.